Hello and welcome to Phillips Mill Community Association's Art Talk. I'm Laura Womack. Jen McHugh is our technical director.
Hi everyone, happy Wednesday.
Today we welcome world-renowned woodturner Mark Sfirri. His work is whimsical, featuring baseball bats that branch or crook sideways, tables with legs and bent knees that seem to dance. His pieces are humorous and engaging, never hinting at the exacting process behind their creation. Mark is known for his multi-axis wood turning on a lathe. We'll talk about what that means. But clearly the technique is challenging and requires careful planning, and yet Mark's results appear effortless. Mark Sfirri has a BFA and an MFA from Rhode Island School of Design. His work is in the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian, the Museum of Arts and Design in New York, Yale University Art Gallery, the LA County Museum of Art, the Carnegie Museum of Art, the Michener Art Museum, and so many more. He's written several articles on Wharton Esherick, lectured and demonstrated on wood turning internationally. Welcome to Art Talk, Mark Sfirri.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
And we hope you'll join us with your questions. Put them in the Q&A and we will take them all if we can. And we like to start right off with artwork. So Jen, let's see some of Mark's work. Famous piece at, I believe this is at the Michener, is that right?
They have a set of mine, not this particular set.
Okay.
I do them in two different ways. This one's with ash and they have wood burned logos. That's the first ones I ever did were done this method, and then the others are in different species of wood, and that's what the Michener has.
Okay, well, tell us about this. There's very definitely a point of view here, Mark. Tell us about this work.
When I first started doing wood turning, which would have been back when I was in college, there was something that was kind of, to me, very boring about turning, in that whenever you put something on the lathe and spin it, it ends up being radially symmetrical. It's not that I don't enjoy things, a bowl or, radially symmetrical pieces, but I just didn't want to do it myself. And I thought there must be some other way to approach this. The bats came later. That was in '93, and I was at RISD in the '70s. And my specialty is in mostly in spindle turning, which is taking a long piece of wood and putting it between centers. And for these, it really started with my son, who came out to the shop, and he was the kind of kid who would just watch a little bit of something on TV and get the idea, and then want to go out and do it and act it out. And so he had his little baseball uniform on, and he said he had watched a little bit of baseball on TV, and they had, in the head of the bat, it was hollowed out, which wasn't something available on Little League bats. And he wanted me to make him one, so I did. And then after I did that, it just got me thinking about how purely functional a bat is, having the heavy end to have a better chance of hitting a ball, and having it narrow at the handle for lightened weight and for comfort, and the knob so the bat didn't fly out of your hand. And I just saw it as an opportunity for to use the bat as a blank canvas, and then play around with some of these ideas I had come up with about how to make things seem a little bit different. And the bats were the result. Every time I make them slightly different from one another. I introduce new designs, and it changes from time to time.
They are very humorous. They make me laugh. The idea that these would ever have been done in a bat factory. It's very evocative, even the title.
Yeah.
One that's been tied in a knot, obviously defying the properties of the material that you're working with. It's a very specific point of view.
Well, I was thinking of, what wood can't do, and tying a piece of wood in a knot, you actually can do that, but not that tight. You can do a sort of loose knot, but And I viewed this as the material was something, had characteristics of another medium, for instance, like clay or something that you could mush around a little bit. And, it's very, there's a lot of math involved in figuring out the angles and what I can do and what I can't do, and still have the centers on the wood. And, so there was a lot of learning for me creating them. And, the intention, I think, initially was that they would be funny or humorous. But the reality is when I'm making them, it's not like I'm laughing all the time. It's a very serious thing. I'm trying to create the effect. Like in the middle bat here, that the diameter here is the same as here. So it would really look like the bat got shifted off center. So that was over tempered wood, and there's under tempered wood. So.
Yeah. I love the way it's playing with the material properties of your medium, the point of view. What's up next, Jen? I'm assuming that you actually made this oversized bat with the bend in it, and that's not a weight issue.
No, yeah, correct. So that was a demonstration piece I did at school when I was teaching. And I wanted to show how to turn a long piece, and it was turned straight. And this was wood that was ash, which is what is used for bats mostly. And it was green. It had just been cut. So there's a lot more ability to bend wood, the greener it is, right? There's more, if you go out to a branch on a tree and it's a living branch, you can actually bend it pretty tightly and not break it, whereas a dead branch is just going to snap. So it had those characteristics because it was green. And then I turned it straight and then had it soak in a gutter for a couple of days to really make sure it was as saturated as it could be, and then put it in a steam tube to make the fibers a little bit more, the ability to stretch the fibers on the outside and compress them on the inside, and then bent them over a form. So I still have it, and it's about 6 feet long. It was just a demonstration piece. So.
A great piece. So what did your students think? You were teaching at Bucks County Community College for almost 40 years. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how did your student, they must have been delighted by this unique perspective that you shared with them, showing them what, that they could have a sense of fun in their woodworking.
Yeah. Well, that was the idea, and nobody fell asleep. But, yeah, I always tried. The whole time I was teaching, I felt as though my own work informed my teaching, and my teaching informed my work, because it forced me to think about it in a way that I could share it with students. And feeding off the energy of students, it helped me be creative in my shop. The thing about those two things, teaching versus making, are two totally different kinds of activities. The one in teaching is just so social. You're with people, you're talking to people all the time, not just the people in the class. You're lecturing, you're talking to them one-on-one. And then when I go home, it was totally solitary. So I can really understand how some people, creative people who are in their studio all the time, would have a very difficult time in front of a group, teaching or whatever. And for me personally, it was a real struggle to be a teacher, because I just had this fear of being in front of a group. And then, when you do it every day for a number of years, you either get better at it or you leave it. And I just wanted to be better at it. And so that was a hard hurdle for me personally.
It can be very draining, though, talking to people. Did you find that you still had creativity? You must have, to create the body of work and over 37 years of teaching.
Well, I worked in industry for 3 years after college, and that was working long days, 6 days a week, and to go from that to teaching was, I had days off, and and I thought, it sort of prepared me for retirement, to tell you the truth, because I thought I have to use every minute I've got, if it's with our son or if it's, family trips or whatever, fine. But I also needed to make the most use of my free time making my artwork, because I wanted to, that's what I love doing. I love teaching, but, I think I also thought that it would be unfair to students if all I did was teach and not be a maker. I felt that that was critical, because it would be, chipping them out of something if I wasn't a part of the field that I was teaching them,
And we learned so much from all the artists that we're privileged to talk with, but what you've just said about using your time to actually create, I think is really such an important lesson, because it's so easy to be tired or distracted. So thank you for that. All right, what's our next artwork, Jen? I love this, Mark. Tell us about it.
Well, this piece, more than any of the bats that have been shown, is really a head scratcher for turners, because they can't figure out how you would do something like that. Can you see my cursor when I have it on, or no?
No, but if Jen
No.
has been using hers, and she'll,
Okay.
yeah.
So if you look at the left side of the bat, it's basically a cylinder that comes down, and it crosses over to the right side, going down, left, down, 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 angling that same direction, down, down, further down. Yeah, down there. That's where the center has to be to turn that left side. But if you do that, you don't have any material there to do the right side. So it's kind of hard to explain without,
Okay, well, let's stop there for a minute, because that is really interesting. You're saying that basically, if I, in my mind, take each half of the bat and extend it, so as you said, the handle, the part of weight that would hit the ball,
yes,
on the left, if you extend that axis down,
right,
that's, you need it to be like that to turn it, but you need it to extend that far. But if you take away that material to create that bat, then you don't have the handle in this work. Is that correct?
yes, yes.
And if anybody who's listening wants further clarity on that, please put it in the Q&A. So, and we'll ask Mark to do that for us. Okay, so yes.
So figuring this out was kind of a hurdle. And what I did was I actually drew a straight bat first, just as if it were straight, drew the center line in it, and took a pair of scissors and cut the drawing in half, and then angled them to one another. And I had the center lines of where the axis had to be for each half, but I stopped it, instead of all the way at the end of the bat, it's actually, there's a little bit of a flat close to the middle, so I could switch it from one to the other. It was a tricky thing to do, but I could flip it back and forth, and had to turn it a little bit slower because it was offset so much. And then the middle part's all hand carved to create.
Okay, I was going to say, did that complicate it at all?
Well,
so what makes you think of an inchworm bat, Mark?
I don't know. I can't answer that. I guess one thing was I wanted to have a freestanding bat, one that wasn't hanging. That was one thing I was trying with this one, and I just had this idea maybe I could have it look sort of cartoonish, and it ended up, I just thought of it as inchworm after the fact. Sometimes I'll come up with a title, and then that's what that's what drives it. But in this particular case, it was, again, really loosey-goosey material here, something that wood can't do, and to create that illusion.
Right. Okay, marvelous. Let's see what's up next, Jen.
So this is, I'm actually having a major exhibition that opens in 2024, in November 1st, 2024, mark your calendar, at the Museum for Art and Wood in Philadelphia. And this is one of the groupings from that show. all the work is done, but with COVID, things got put off for a while. So, and there'll be a full color catalog with it too. These were, I view these as kind of, let me step back a second. The title of the exhibition is La Familia. I'm half Italian, and La Familia, the family. And everything kind of relates. It relates in two different ways. One is actual family. So these are family members, family tree. And then the other is family of form. So they're sort of working at two different ways on that subject. And there's a big collaborative element to it too. There's 45 people, artists involved in one project that I came up with for it. So that's kind of neat too. And these are what I would call three-dimensional photographs. So it's kind of like they each have their own frame, but then this head is emerging from it. And these are not turned at all. They're all carved. I mean, they have some rounded elements, but they're made out of Western yellow cedar, which is a beautiful carving wood. And they're all about the same size, about 11 inches tall. And as is typical with, particularly with painted pieces that I do, I spent a period of time just making them in the white, in other words, not painted, and had them all completed, but no finish or no paint. And I didn't even know what I was going to do with them, whether they should just stay natural wood and the wood is a very sort of grainless wood. It's whitish color, a little bit off-white. And they sat for a couple of years, and that's not uncommon. I mean, maybe it's a little long, but and then at a certain point, I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to do it. I want to paint these, and I want them to have, sort of cartoony looking aspects to them. And the first ones I did were a little bit more, I would say, conservative. And then I just started to really get into, and I didn't do a lot of sketching really. I mean, there were pretty rough sketches, but a lot of my work is three-dimensional sketching. I figure it out as I go along. And then, one thing that was important for these was I wanted to make sure they stood up and they were solid. So there's a triangle on the ground. The lower right one, the banana one there.
Yes.
So it has the point of its chin, and then the wall is behind it, sort of tilting forward. So some of them work that way. Some of them have, like the second from the left has the support in the back, in the middle, and it has the two edges. So I like this sort of zigzaggy edge. There's something common from one to the next. And, they're sort of like photographs that are posed on the piano or something like that. And
Right.
I wasn't sure what to call them either. And then Nick Flaherty was working for me at the time, and he's the one who came up with Family Tree. So I thought, yeah, that makes sense.
It's a nice pun. And I enjoy that. Any particular reason for the fruit, like the banana, the carrot, some of the faces? What were the inspiration for the particular characters?
I don't know how to answer that. I don't really know. I just, much of what I do, I like to be creative, and it's creative as I'm going along. I didn't draw these all out beforehand. I did one, and I think the first one I did isn't even on here, but the second one I did, I think, is the one on the left. And then, I'm like, well, maybe I could push that a little bit further. And I'm thinking about a little bit of the math element, make sure it stays, it's not going to tip over. And then, I got into vegetables a little bit, fruit, vegetable. And then there's the one in the back left, which there's this big horn that's his nose that comes up. And, I had to think about grain direction to make sure these were going to be strong. There was a lot of little things from a carving standpoint. You learn about the material in different ways. If you're a furniture maker, you learn about with the grain and across the grain and what you can do, joinery and things like that. It's more math related. When you turn, there are ways to hold the tool to make sure you're not going to have a catch and that sort of thing. And you do learn about grain, but carving is where you really learn about grain and understand that, when the grain's changing and when you would be cutting against the grain and you have a tear out or something like that. So I think carvers in particular, traditional carvers, ones that use edge tools, which is what I use, gouges and chisels, understand grain in a way that the other groups don't. It's just a difference. I mean, the materials just has to be dealt with in a different way.
Right. And so there's so much here that's technical that, is so far from my understanding. So forgive me if I ask you some basic questions, but if you say you're using math to calculate how it's going to stand up, does that mean area of, are you calculating the area of a piece of wood and how much of it needs to be in what part of the carving in order for it to stand? Or what are you doing with that math?
Equilateral triangle.
Okay.
So either, there's 2 points in the back and 1 in the middle in the front, or 2 in the front, left and right, and then 1 in the back in the middle. The closest to that I can get, it's going to stand, and I know that. You can cheat a little if you're tilting, weight can become a factor, but not really. I mean, just making it the broadest triangle you can.
Sure, fair enough. Okay. All right, next up, glancing figures. It has a totally different feel as that's coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, these were really challenging. The first ones I did were bilaterally symmetrical. In other words, it looked like a figure standing at attention. And actually, can you show me now instead of this for a second? I just want to show you. Can we get off the slides for a second? Okay, so you can see me here now.
Yes.
All right. So this is a detail of a turning that I've done. Right. This is, basically there's an axis let me move back a little bit, at the top that allows me to create the bottom side, and one at the bottom that allows me to create the top side. And so as it rotates, it's only touching on one side. And what I thought was really interesting about this is the line of definition around that goes up the edge of it. And at one point I had this idea, I wonder what this would look like if it was curved like that, beads and coves, and made it smooth on the other. What I thought I was making was a handle, but what I ended up making was a figure. And so I'll put it on the side so you can see this. So here's that kind of straight, and then here is kind of beads and coves. And this was the first one I did. And I thought, okay, well, so from the front, bilaterally symmetrical, and from the side, I could create this figurative form. And this is the actual piece. So that I went from that to that. And that's not too huge of a jump, but then once I did this is 1997, I spent a year making figures. And the first ones were bilaterally symmetrical, but then after that, I thought, well, I wonder if I could make it look like the body's twisting and heads turned and tilted. And it got me into this whole other math kind of related thing of figuring out how to do that. And there's a balance in the work that I do between creative expression and the reality, especially in turning, and the reality of cause and effect relationships of if it's on this axis, what's the shape going to end up looking like, or the form look like? And the thing about engineering, so that would sort of be the engineering side of it. So there's the creative side of it, and there's the engineering side of it. And I've learned that if I let engineering jump in too soon, it'll start to steer the overall form in a direction that I might not want to go in at that point, and just change it. And it's hard to shut the engineer up and go back to the create. You know what I mean? It is a balance. But I found for me that I really need to just let the creative part work for a while, and then say, okay, now I'm ready for the engineer to tell me what to do. And what was the engineering was simply drawing these from the top view, not the side view, and figuring out where the axes had to be in order to create that kind of football shape and cross section. And then all of a sudden, everything fell into place. Okay, now I understand that. But it's one of those things that everything's changing. The form's changing. The axes aren't parallel to each other. They're non-parallel, and it gets very complicated very quickly. So it's one of the things that I really, if you gave me a piece of wood, I can, without even thinking about it, make something that's a close proximity to something I've done before, except for the glancing figures. They need the tweaking. And so what I do is I'll take a piece of wood and I'll try to remember how I got there and then turn it. Have two pieces of wood, one that I turn, and then the piece itself is my sketchbook. And I'm looking at it and say, okay, move this detail up, move that over, and it has notes on it. And then I take the other one and then I can do it. So 9 times out of 10, that's what I have to do for those figures. The other thing's not so much, because I can remember it. There's simple, details or something that,
So do you actually, I mean, forgive me for being so literal, do you actually write on them, or do you look at it and you see what you need to know?
No, I write on them,
Wow.
Change this, move this center over a little bit. And then it becomes, I discard it because I've made the change in the next one.
Right.
So every time I make a new one, I have another one in the wings of a different kind of wood, just a cheap wood that I can save as my master, or my primary one that I'm going to refer to for that particular project.
And when you, just last question before we go back to these and look at these in detail, because they're so elegant and pretty. The creative process versus the engineer, I think of, correct me if I'm wrong, that creative process is play and exploration. And then when you get to the engineering, that's sort of is figuring out how to direct whatever the play has sparked in your mind. The engineer is, okay, now how do I achieve the final goal that I figured out that I want to make? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, that makes sense. It's not totally that. It's not one or the other. I mean, they do work in concert, those two concepts, but but trying to get all those edges the way they are and not symmetrical to each other, it's there's a lot of experimenting and figuring out how to get there. But I got to the point where I could take a figure and have the head turned and tilted one way or the other. However I wanted to do it, I knew how to get there. So, but it was a combination of what I've learned from doing them. And this represents about a year's work. And these were the last, the bigger ones were the last ones that I did.
And I would imagine the balance is going to be so critical on these really slight, elongated figures.
Yeah.
So tell us about the pieces themselves. They're so beautiful, Mark.
It's funny. I always thought of the figures as being androgynous. I didn't make them as male or female, but some men think they're all men. Some men think they're all women. Some women think they're all men. Some women think they're all women. And, I will say that it really has to do with the mass or the bulk. For instance, the one on the right to me looks more masculine just because the shoulders are broader. It's a wider piece of wood given the height. And my favorite of all of them is the second from the left. I mean, that thing is just like so thin and delicate. That one's at Yale University in their permanent collection. Wow. And that was a real, and you can't predict it. I mean, when you're doing it, you just, almost making the same thing over and over, but they're not. I mean, I'm not trying to duplicate it, any of these exactly. But
yeah, they all have their own personality, a unique look. They're really, really lovely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And they're pretty much pure turnings, other than the chin nests into the shoulder. You can't really see, you can see it on the second one from the right, a little bit there, but that part of it has to be carved. And all these details were typically a result of a mistake. Like I thought, oh, I have all this wood here. What am I going to do? And I thought, well, I'll just have the shoulders, go up and the and the chin come down and nest in a little bit. And then that became the detail. You know, it was just sort of, I learned how to adapt different forms, and everything that I've done is working toward a vocabulary that has elements that I can put into other things in the future, right? So different details that I come up with, I can use in a different way on another piece,
Right.
because of that learned vocabulary.
Yeah, that makes sense. Next up is 2 vases of flowers. While Jen pulls that up, I will remind you all that you're welcome to join the conversation in the Q&A if you want to put some questions for Mark in there. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, Mark, tell us about the 2 vases.
Well, my son and his fiance, now wife, wanted to get married last October, and so in the early summer, the venue where they were getting married wouldn't allow flowers because of the pollen. It was a museum. And I said, no problem, I'll make the flowers. So I ended up, and Kim, my daughter-in-law, gave me a sort of palette range of lavender to red to orange. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. And she liked, her favorite flower is ranunculus.
Yes, beautiful
And
flower.
And so I thought, okay, I have to look up ranunculus. And then I looked it up. I saw what they look like. And then I tried to make one and it looked awful. It's the only one that I never finished. And I thought, okay, I have to forget about looking at flowers and making flowers. I have to think about, you know, my lifetime of having seen flowers. So that was that part. And then combine that with what can I do by turning and carving. So it was a blend between the two. And then after that, they all seemed to, you know, work out. I thought they were coming out well. And then I made, these were at the, you know, where they were getting married. There was a pedestal that held these 2 vases. They're each about 40 inches tall. And I wasn't sure if they even liked them. So when I got a few of them painted, I had them both come over and look at them, because I didn't want it to be a big surprise right at the wedding. And she really liked them. And so we went from there. And then, you know, I got those done. And then I made a boutonniere for my son. And then I made a bouquet for her to hold. And I made, for the wedding party, I made little pins that had flowers on them too. So it was really fun. And then now I've become a florist. Never would have seen that coming. So I'm doing many different flowers. And I had thought that maybe I could put them in my exhibition at the Museum for Art and Wood, but that's already full and I couldn't do that. But I continue to make them. And I'm planning for a show just of flowers, a flower show.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous. I mean, when you first said that you they couldn't have flowers because of the pollen and that you made them, I thought how wonderful to have a father or a father-in-law who's an artist. And then it occurs to me that, you know, flowers can be so expensive for a wedding. I would imagine these would be about as expensive as you would go.
Yeah, these would be more expensive, but they'll last forever.
Yeah, there you go. That's nice. Okay.
So the first ones were painted, and then now I'm using naturally finished woods like holly. They're pure white, and other woods that are, you know, don't have a lot of grain to them, but have a nice color. So.
Right. So you talked about being a furniture maker, and I think when you started at RISD, that was the program you were in, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You did end up making furniture. Why did you start in the furniture program?
Oh, it was just by chance. I mean, I love art, and I had a great teacher in high school, public high school, Pencrest High School, Claude Falcone, fabulous teacher, set a really high bar for us with the amount of projects we had to do, weekly in-class assignments, weekly out-of-class assignments, quarterly assignments, yearly assignments. and plus reading and outline. It was like it was like you were a major in college in art, the amount of stuff we had to do. But I was so interested in it, and the bar, he couldn't set the bar too high for me. I would just do it all. And so basically that's what got me into RISD. But my parents, being the practical Depression era people that they were, said, okay, you can go to, it's the only place I wanted to go because it had a good reputation as an art school. And they said, okay, you can go there if you major in architecture. And I said, okay, whatever, as long as I'm there. I don't, but I hated it. I just really didn't like it, working on conceptual. And part of it really was not architecture per se, but it was the way it was taught there. It was sort of half pragmatic and half conceptual. So the department chair, he had a piece in a faculty show, and it was the holding pattern of planes over LaGuardia. So it was kind of this path. And, that's kind of interesting, but it didn't really resonate with me as far as using my hands or, just what is that? It just didn't mean anything to me. And so I sort of came to a crossroads. I had to figure out what to do. And I had interest in printmaking, photography. These are areas that I explored. I did some wood carving when I was in high school, and I just went around to different studios. And there were the glass, Dale Chihuly was teaching glass there, but I just didn't, I had no interest in glass being, you can burn yourself and you can't even touch the material. So I was like, no, I'm not interested. And
you could do a lot of damage with the lathe too, Mark, or the carving tools.
Yeah, you're right. But you can touch it.
You can touch it.
And there was the math part of it. There were just aspects of it. And I walked into the wood shop, and there were Alphonse Mattia was a grad student, and he was phenomenal. And my feeling really about college is it's the students more than it's the faculty. And because you're working side by side with other really creative people. Not to say that I didn't have a good teacher. I did, Tay Frid, but he wasn't. His strength was really technical as opposed to design. And so once I started, and I just embraced it 100% and didn't do anything like painting or graphic design or printmaking. I just put all that aside and was focused on wood for many years, for decades. And then I thought, well, it'd be nice to bring some of that back into it. So painting and, just different, doing printmaking again, I do that sometimes.
Interesting. Well, let's take a look at some of your furniture. Okay.
Yeah, that was a fun one. So, along the lines of, so I had this idea. There was sort of this development. I don't know if I gave you a photograph of a candlestick that I do, but that was sort of the first thing. It angled one way and it angled back. That was the first multi-axis design that I came up with in 92-ish.
Mark, we do have that. I'm going to interrupt you and I asked Jen, let's go to that if that's foundational, and let's talk about that, because I did promise that we talk about what multi-axis design is, and I'd love an explanation of that, and then we can go back and look at the furniture and with a greater understanding. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, this one's a more complicated one, many different axes, and it's very much a one-of-a-kind piece. Most of the ones that I did were just simple on one axis and another. And so I would have a hard time even duplicating this without having another. If I made two of these at the same time and just didn't finish the ends off of one of them, I would know exactly how to get there. But this would be a tricky thing for me to duplicate exactly.
So can you talk about the multi-axis? I'm assuming in my mind, I'm drawing a line up the center of this, and the line sort of changes angle.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, so here's a great example. Yeah, so the top, the next detail, and the bottom cylindrical area are all turned on one axis, and that's the second axis. The second from the bottom up, that one on the bottom side, and the top of the lower portion are turned on an axis that goes off at an angle. So I did that part first, and then I came back and straightened it up here. So it really looks like that second element up is falling off. You know, it's kind of drifted away. And so when I did these, I was kind of pleased with the fact that I was getting a result that was, to me, reasonable, and it had an interesting effect. And it was really my wife, who's my best critic. She said, "Oh, I can't wait to see how this is translated into furniture." And I was like, "No, this is it." You know, I was a little annoyed, to tell you the truth, but. And then about 6 months later, I had this brilliant idea of just using the same concept on a table leg. So she was right.
Okay. So just so I understand, if we're going, when you say it's on the different axis, when you said the three elements, Jen, if we could see that again real quickly.
Yeah.
If I draw a line up mentally through the center of
Right.
the bottom one and the top two shapes,
Mhm.
that is just a straight line. But when
Yes.
we get to the second from the bottom shape, the line takes a turn to the right.
Yeah, so it
Goes
starts
to
in the bottom of the axis is lower left, all the way over there, about, stop there at the bottom, down a little bit. So there's
Okay.
one, maybe, yeah, around there. And now that's one point. And then at the top, go all the way to the top, to the right, keep going to the right. No,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, go swimming out in that ocean. Go to the right. Yeah, keep going. There you go, right there. Okay, so if it's from that point down to the lower left, that's positioned in a way that I can turn that second element.
The second from the bottom piece,
Second from the bottom,
going
yeah.
through those 2 points that Jen
Yes,
just
yeah,
pointed. And then the other three elements are, there's a line up the middle, and it's basically top and
Yeah.
bottom.
right.
Okay, just to be clear. Okay, good. So let's take a look at the furniture. Thank you, Jen.
Oh, so this is, okay.
Sorry, Jen, we're flipping around here.
That one.
There we go.
So,
Okay.
so it was the same thing, that I started in the bottom right and go to the upper left and then flip it to do the top part. This is a little bit, the first ones I did were bilaterally symmetrical from a 45-degree angle. So like the figures were bilaterally symmetrical. But for this, I decided to push that a little bit further and have the legs not be symmetrical. So it makes the piece actually look like it's twisting. And the question I'm often asked is the top flat and level? And it is. I mean, that's important to me. It's a table after all.
Right.
But it's having the fun doing the getting there, you know, experimenting with the legs. This one's painted, and then I have this, any place there's an inside corner, I have an extra little detail there, so it'll catch the paint and it almost looks like it's glowing. But the reality is that all the legs are exactly the same. It's just that each one's rotated 90 degrees to the next. And at the top of the leg, typically a turned leg is round until it gets to the block at the top, where you need to have a square surface for the joinery, the mortises and the tenons. And that's the case here too. It's just that the leg is drifted out from that square block. So part of that is carved to create that illusion of the leg drifting out from the square block.
It's really fabulous. Jen, let's see the second table. And while you pull that up, I want to know, Mark, what did your wife think of the furniture? Since you were sort of, she threw that at you.
Yeah. You know, I think she liked it. I mean, yeah, she did. So this one actually came before the last one. So this one, if you look, you're almost looking at that left front leg at a 45-degree angle, and it is symmetrical. So each one of these legs are bowed out. And it almost, to me, because of the geometry of the layout, as well as the lines I'm using, which is very straight, sort of angular cuts, it looks more spider-like
Right.
than another one I did, which had more roundy elements, and it just creates a different kind of illusion, even though it's the same layout.
So you gave a lecture for Rego recently, Rego Auction
Yeah.
House, for their
Yeah.
woodworking, and you had a really nice observation about Nakashima, and you said that he respected the wood and put, if I quoting you correctly, and that individual perspective was less important for him, and
Right.
it's
Places the material first and foremost, the beauty of
right.
the material, and personal expression, which most studio makers that I know do, as I wouldn't say non-existent, because there's a look to his work, but it's much less important. First and foremost, is the material. And to
And
me, it's not. I mean, I personal expression is number one, and then I figure out how I can do what I want to do. But so
yeah. Yeah, I just thought it was so interesting that I mean, you come from such a different perspective, and the results really show. It was a fascinating observation for me, so I thank you for that.
yeah.
Jem, we do have a question. What have we got?
Oh, well, I have so many questions, but I'll ask Jim's first. Jim wants to know, where do you generally acquire all the different types of woods that you use?
At the lumberyard. So I don't know. There's places out in York, Pennsylvania, Groff, what is it? Hearn Woods, Hearn Hardwoods. It depends really what I'm after. Like I've used many different species of woods. And you know, if I'm going to be painting something, generally it's going to be poplar or maple if I want something a little bit harder, or Western yellow cedar. You just start looking and you find things in different places. I've mail ordered wood from the West Coast, the Western yellow cedar, for instance, and also in Portland, there's a great wood place there too. So with the internet, it's a whole lot easier. I was up in Maine over the weekend, and there's a rare woods place there that was phenomenal, and they had some presence online, and I could look at what they had. I was looking for some French boxwood, which is a beautiful wood. I wanted to get some of that for flowers, so I made a side trip up there to get that. But I don't know, I guess early on in my career, I was doing, I'm always looking for bigger chunks of wood, and that's much harder to find. So, you know, sometimes it's, you're limited because of what might be available. And typically that would be more of domestic woods like cherry or ash. And, you know, having been in the field for 40 years, or 50 years, you find things. And when I have a project, I have a specific need of a specific dimension, like some wood for the top and, you know, heavier pieces for the legs. But whenever I would go to buy wood, I'd always buy something that I wasn't looking for. It just appealed to me so that I'd have it as an option. Of course, you do that for decades, then all of a sudden you have a ton of wood, which I do. And so I'm trying to use it all up. But inevitably I have to buy, you know, something here or there. So it's not a great answer, but you know, there are wood places all around. There's in Doylestown, there's a great wood place there that so.
It's always interesting where artists get their materials, because it can be so particular, which is great. So thank you for that. We do appreciate it. And Jen, I want to honor your question. So what's your question?
Okay, my question is about the wood in this table, Mark. Would you, if you had used different wood, or why did you choose this wood for this form? Does that make sense? Like if you had
Yeah.
switched them, do you think it would have looked different? I mean, obviously a little bit, but
Yeah, so the wood on the rails and the top, and oftentimes I do this with a table. The top and rails are usually the same thickness, like an inch thick, typically, maybe an inch and a quarter. And the legs require heavier wood. So it's not like you can buy wood that's thicker and have it look like the thinner wood, because a lot of times it's from a different tree, or, it's hard to match them perfectly. So I've just cut to the chase here and say, okay, I'll use one, out of one board, I can get the wood for the rails and the top, and then another board, I can get the wood for the legs. This happens to be just a really spectacular board of curly maple that I made the legs from. And the top and the rails are what we often call Australian lacewood, but it's actually not really that to an Australian, but that's what we call it. And it's quarter sawn, so it has this flecking in it that's quite interesting. So it's pretty intense grain wise for both species.
It's absolutely stunning. I mean, this is one of my favorite pieces. It's really a very beautiful piece of furniture. Where did it end up?
That's in a major collector in Arkansas who
Well,
has
lucky
a bunch of
person.
more, so.
Good for them. We've got time for one more image, Jen. If we can do, I'm switching it up on you again, the poplar bronze bowl, number 9. I like to keep her on her toes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have even known this was a bowl. I see it, of course, now.
Yeah, it's not bronze, just so you know.
Oh, sorry. Yes, the in quotes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had this large piece of poplar, and I wanted to do a bowl that was not symmetrical and have these edges come together, and that would have been a hard thing to draw. Like, what does the intersection of that sort of curved element in the front left and the side piece coming together, how does that look? Well, for this one I used plasticine clay, plastilina. So it's an oil-based clay, and then I just started constructing forms and came up with that detail with the clay. So and it just evolved from that, and then I carved it, and then this finish that I use is an interesting one to me. It's actually only using black and white, but for some reason it comes out blue, and I can't tell you why, because it's nothing. There must be some, the black's not purely black, or the white's not purely white, and when you mix the two together, it creates this effect. So the base color is black, and that's, a number of stages to put that on and to sand it and smooth it out. And then I go over it with an oil-based paint on top that I can wipe on and wipe off. If you tried to do that with water base on top, it would just dry, before you could do that. So, and then I kind of burnish it. So I like the way that one came out.
Wow. It's beautiful. I think we're also fond of the beautiful turned bowls that you see everywhere. And this is just a whole other level. We had a really nice time, Mark, talking about your work. And so I entirely forgot to talk to you about your work researching Wharton Esherick. Maybe we can have you back another time talking about that. But what I know, your show at the Museum for Art and Wood is coming up, and I think you said that you're pretty prepped for that. So what are you working on now?
Flowers.
The flowers, right?
For my flower show.
For your flower show, and where is your flower show going to be?
It's going to be around here somewhere.
Right.
I'm hoping the Michener, so we'll see.
Yeah.
And it might be at the same time as the other show, so that'll be great.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your work with us on ArtTalk.
Thank you so much. Thanks to Jean and Jen and Sean, and of course you, Laura. Thanks for all your great questions. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And so, of course, Mark is talking about Jen is our technical producer. Today's guest producer is sculptor Sean Campbell, and you can see her Instagram feed at Sean_Campbell_artist. Jen has put Mark's website in the chat for you. Our managing producer is Jean Mahitch. And check us out at phillipsmill.org for information on upcoming art talks and to see past shows. This will be, the recording of this will be on our website and our YouTube page for future viewing. So thank you all very much. I'm Laura Womack, Phillips Mill Community Association's Art Talk. Good night.